Good morning, everyone. Happy Hump Day, and welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by my fellow Mirror columnist, Ros Wynne-Jones. We're going to take you through the big stories of the day, and we're going to show you some reasons to be cheerful. And through it all, we want you to ask us your questions. Get into the comments below, ask us whatever's burning a hole in your head, and we will do our best to answer them for you. So what have we got in the papers today? Well, the Tories have been giving free money to their mates under cover of a crisis, just for a change. And Sir Geoff Hurst says he'll donate his brain to medical research. He's one of just 4 players surviving from England's 1966 World Cup squad. And there's a great interview with him in the paper today about the beautiful game's links to Alzheimer's disease, which is a great read. Buy the paper and have a look into it. But first, we are 5 weeks from Christmas, and the government is starting an awful lot of talk about us all being able to meet up with 3 households of up to 10 people for the celebrations. Now, this is hugely important to Boris because he needs it for political reasons to make it look like something normal is happening this year. But it's important to the NHS and those likely to contract the illness that we don't all turn up in hospital at New Year spluttering our last gasp. So, Ros, is this really wise? What do you think?
Well, far be it for me to, praise Boris Johnson, but I wonder if it's something we all need, actually. We need some hope. We need to get through the winter. We know that over the next, kind of few days, there's a vaccine coming. Maybe if we can just get together on one day and have that experience. I know for people like my parents and lots of elderly people, the thought of not having Christmas with their grandchildren is almost unthinkable. So if people could do it sensibly and just have a day together and then maybe not carry on for the full 12 days of Christmas going up, then,
I think the opposite word there, Ros, is sensibly. People who are going to get together with folks and perhaps still try to stay as distant as possible, not too much snogging, that sort of thing. There'll be people like that, but there's an awful lot who'll just go, "Raha!" It's
But aren't there just a lot of people that are going to do it anyway? That's my. I mean, the number of people that I've spoken to said, "Well, I'm not going to do that for Christmas. I'm seeing who I would like for Christmas." Realistically, it's probably going to happen anyway. So, will we tolerate more restrictions now that help us towards that outcome if you give people something to look forward to?
Yeah, Linda's asking now, I live on my own. Can I still see my children and grandchildren? I live on my own as well, Linda, with a daughter. But if you're a single adult household, you're able to bubble with another household. So if your children and grandchildren are not bubbling with anybody else, then they can bubble with you, and your 2 households can meet up as regularly as you like. Okay, I see my folks, my parents, several times a week. They live quite near to me, so I'm lucky like that. But if you are a single adult household, you can bubble either with another single adult household or your children or a family household of some sort or your neighbours, anyone you like. So you can bubble during the Christmas period. You can bubble with them permanently during the pandemic. So you don't have to be on your own. But Ros, what you were just saying is really interesting because this seems to follow, it says in the paper here, that the plan follows health chiefs' warning to ministers that families might ignore these rules anyway. And so you've got a situation, as you've just said, where if people are going to go and have Christmas no matter what, they're basically going to, if they haven't already, are ignoring the government rules. And therefore, after Christmas, the fear is they will ignore them harder, if you see what I mean. And so if we can somehow allow a loosening of the rules that everyone can agree to, it's the government agreeing to look the other way, so long as and let us be naughty on the understanding that we'll be good again after Boxing Day. It's kind of
I think some people might be quite disappointed by that because I know quite a few people who've been saying, actually, I can't wait to just have Christmas with my kids, and maybe the in-laws don't have to come. So this may be tough news. I'm sorry for anyone who's experiencing this as kind of tough news this morning. In my family, it's more like, which 10 will come, because we kind of have notoriously huge Christmases. So you can see that people are going to, somebody's nose is going to be out of joint.
Exactly.
When the 10 the chosen 10.
Yeah, and Boris Johnson, of course, would be able to see all his children, we think, under this. Who knows? Now, Courtney asks, are pubs and restaurants going to be open? In theory, after December the 2nd, I think, is the answer, isn't it, Ros? But it sort of depends how well this lockdown's gone.
I feel as if, and I might be wrong, but I really feel as if we might be heading for a very strict, like as we come out of this lockdown, that there will be some very strict tiers imposed, maybe as far as tier 4, and that actually this Christmas thing might be used as a way to soften us up to put up with those tough regulations for 2 or 3 weeks, which is not necessarily a bad idea. Like if we could then bring the R rate down and bring the curve down through some pretty harsh restrictions, but still allow people to not just have that horrific lonely Christmas that I think a lot of elderly people are dreading.
Yeah, but there's some people, of course, who either don't celebrate Christmas. There's others who don't even enjoy it, as you've already said, people who don't want to see their in-laws, perhaps not all their children if they're not publicly admitted to. And there are those of us who would like to celebrate Christmas, have someone in our family who's shielding. They'll have someone, perhaps they're self-isolating, or they're staying away from relatives who live at the other end of the country, and they don't want to carry the infection to them, and they want to protect them, and they haven't seen them all year. And a lot of those people are going to be making the decision that they still don't want to see them at Christmas, because it kind of would negate the care they have taken up to now. So, you know, if Boris is doing this thing again, isn't he, of having to weigh up putting people first and what the voters need with what businesses need. And businesses are going to want everyone to be open and shopping before Christmas, and they don't care if people shut down during Christmas. But people would rather be seeing their folks at Christmas and would perhaps more happily spend December at their own.
I think the whole pandemic, in terms of how it's applied in the UK, has been so just massively uneven, really, particularly on people that have been shielding, and there are people that have been shielding for months and months, you know, at this point, who've left the house since February, March. And it's really important to remember those people and try and think of ways that they can also kind of enjoy some sort of Christmas, you know, whether it's through technology or other methods, or, you know, deliveries to the doorstep and all those sorts of things. And I've come across some, you know, incredibly moving stories of how people have tried to get together. I mean, I also think it's really harsh on people that have just come through Diwali and Eid and things like that are so important in their families, and yet there's this kind of, you know, focus on Christmas. But I guess by the people being able to come together who can come together, and us all trying to remember those who can't, feels like some sort of way through it, I guess.
Perhaps. Gina asked, I'm at my own home for Christmas with my 2 boys. What can I do? Suddenly my mic's muted. Now, if you're a single adult at home, Gina, on your home during Christmas, then you can, as we said earlier on, you can bubble with another household. So you could do that with a neighbour or with family or relatives or friends if they're nearby. The other thing you can do, and it's something that Ros just mentioned, perhaps find someone who's near you who is on their own, who is going to need Christmas dinner delivered to the doorstep, because otherwise they won't get one. Perhaps this is an opportunity, you know, for us to do, as they had that sort of sense of collective self-sacrifice earlier in the year, when people came out and clapped the NHS and started looking after their neighbours a little bit. Perhaps we could do a bit more of that around Christmas time, not just because it's Christmas, but because it's the hardest winter period anyway, and perhaps have a look, keep an eye out for each other, even more than we have done for the rest of this year. Anton asks, when are care homes allowing loved ones inside? My dad's nearing the end of life. Ros, you've been following lots of reporting about what's going on in care homes, both for older people and younger people.
I mean, I think that the government's failure to get a grip of the sort of care home kind of issue, I mean, obviously in the first lockdown, the first wave of the pandemic, so many lives were lost. But in the second one, the idea that we haven't got to a position where people are going to be able to safely see their relatives is just, it's really criminal, actually, I think. There are people, you know, at the end of life, there are people whose dementia and Alzheimer's and things is just worsening because of the lack of contact from their relatives. I cannot imagine how painful it would be to be separated, you know, at this time from somebody in that situation. And we just need to have sorted out this testing. You know, I totally cannot see why we can't have a testing program where relatives are tested and go in and see people, especially at Christmas. I mean, that should be a massive priority of the government right now.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to your question, Anton, really is that Matt Hancock has said this week, in response to campaigns by the Mirror and the Mail, actually, about care home access around Christmas time, has said that he's doing 20 pilot schemes around the country in which one relative would get a test and be able to go in and see a loved one, and that this is expected to be rolled out across the country, which is another sort of 12,000 care homes by Christmas. So in theory, Matt Hancock, if he was here, would tell you, well, you'd be able to go and see your dad at Christmas time. However, as Ros has just pointed out, we knew about these care home problems in spring, and it has taken some newspaper campaigns and the rest of the year before the government even got to the point of running some pilots. So we knew this was coming. We could have predicted it. Nothing was done about it. It's being done late. I would be amazed if all care homes have this in place by Christmas Day. I just would. I think we're looking at...
It just feels to me this is like another kind of Brexit mess kind of coming down the tracks. It's like we knew Christmas was coming. We know that December 31st is coming. We know all these things are coming. And yet we just seem to be, incredibly ill prepared, which is a very weird irony when we know that, lots of people have been preparing for Christmas for months on end because they know it's going to be difficult, and we just really want the same from the government. I feel the same. I don't have any faith that the government will get this sorted in time for Christmas, and I think I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
Yeah, your best hope, Anton, is that local councils, local authorities can set some of their own rules for care home access. So they could be tougher than the government restrictions, or they could be a bit more relaxed. And it's kind of dependent as well on care homes getting the right kit in place to enable you to see them. And it's difficult for some of them because they're not getting money from the government to pay for that. They're having to pay for it themselves. So...
And they've already paid so much already. Like the care home people that I've interviewed, people who run care homes, they've already, loads of them, been paying for PPE. They've been paying for extra cleaning. They've been doing nothing but kind of shell out. So they're being asked to shell out yet again.
Yeah, exactly. Now, thank you for all your questions, everybody, about the care homes. Keep asking us anything that's on your mind. We're going to try and keep answering them as we go. But I want to get on to the next story, which is to the grumpy granddad that we thought we wouldn't have to see this Christmas. Jeremy Corbyn has been in, he's been out, and now the Labour Party is shaking itself all about by letting him back in after a clarification about anti-Semitism, which still wasn't an apology and still didn't really mention it too much. Ros, what is going on? It's basically the hokey cokey is all I can see.
I think that's a really good question. It's another. I think what Keir Starmer said yesterday was right. Basically, that this was another painful day for the Jewish community, and as a member of the Labour Party, it breaks my heart that the party that I'm a member of keeps causing painful days for the Jewish community. This kind of row's come about because the EHRC report that came out into anti-Semitism, at the time Corbyn said that he spoke in favourable terms about the report, but as part of his response to it, he said that anti-Semitism itself had been dramatically overstated in the party, and we can't say that. We have to stop saying that. The EHRC report itself has made it very clear that people need to stop saying that. And, even in the address that Keir Starmer gave over this, he said that those who pretend it's all exaggerated or factional are part of the problem. So let's say Corbyn can't say that. He's had to be reprimanded and therefore was, told that he was no longer a Labour MP. He's now been reinstated by the NEC. The NEC is brand new. They've only just been voted in a very short time ago.
And they're fairly moderate as well, aren't they?
Yeah, and the NEC is a great mix of the different wings and parts of the Labour Party. So they've reached this decision. But of course, the final decision as to whether to restore the whip doesn't belong to the NEC. It belongs to Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, and the chief whip. And I should imagine that Starmer's feeling under some pressure to make a decision about that. It's Wednesday, it's PMQs. And I guess the frustration for all of us is, even looking at that page in the Mirror today, the stories around the side of that page that are so important, and yet we're still kind of stuck in this, this story, mired in the sort of row about anti-Semitism. Like the stories around the edge, you've got the Tories are going to cut overseas aid by £5 billion during a pandemic. That's when the government thinks that's a great time to cut aid from countries that don't have a national health service, that don't have our infrastructure.
Yeah, and that aid would be used to buy vaccines in some of those places.
Yeah, and in the meantime, we're just hoovering up all the vaccines in the world and being really pleased with ourselves that we're doing that. Which may sound unpatriotic, but it's something I feel quite uncomfortable about. And then you've got, the war in Ethiopia is escalating, and there's a story they're saying most teachers have a homeless pupil in their class. Most teachers have a homeless pupil. So, for me, these are the issues that we need to be talking about. We need to move on from this. That's not to underestimate at all the pain that's been caused to the Jewish community. And I've been very ashamed as a Labour member to see Jewish people leave the party and Jewish people hurt by the Labour Party. But we do need to just get this issue sorted and move on, because there were so many people facing so many horrific things. My column, the Real Britain column, every week is about people who are really at the sharp end of the pandemic and the sharp end of austerity and the sharp end of Tory policies. And there's so much work for the Labour Party to be doing.
Yeah. And that Rhiannon just asked there, why are we still obsessed with Jeremy Corbyn? The only members of Parliament we should be discussing are Matt Hancock and Cummings and Goings. Both made a complete mockery of the pandemic. You're right, Rhiannon, that's what Ros just said. But there is an unspoken sort of protocol here that when you are the outgoing leader of a party, of any party, you keep your mouth shut for a bit and you let your successor do what they're going to do, and that just applies to everybody in almost every situation. If you're the MD of a company and you're leaving, you don't go back and start picking fights with the people who are now running the company in your absence. Barack Obama didn't go and have a go at Trump for quite a long time, let him get away with a lot of stuff before he started sounding off. Ed Miliband didn't come in and have a go at Corbyn. You keep your mouth shut. And when that EHRC report came out, Corbyn should really have just zipped it. And this would not have happened. None of this would be going on. And it would all be just quietly forgotten about. And the Corbynistas would be happy and everyone else would be happy. But because he's wanted to give it some of this, Keir Starmer's now in this tricky situation. And what do you think is going to happen before PMQs, Ros? Because Boris Johnson, if Jeremy Corbyn is still a Labour MP at 12 o'clock today, is going to have an absolute field day with Starmer during a week in which Boris Johnson should be really hard on the ropes. So Starmer's got to do something. My bet would be that he's going to have to withdraw the whip by 12 o'clock. What do you reckon?
I think it's difficult because I think also one of the things people are concerned about with the NEC decision was that it kind of happened so quickly. So there's also the thing that, this anti-Semitism didn't happen overnight. It's become a sort of longer term issue within the Labour Party. It's probably not going to get eradicated overnight, even if we have kind of zero tolerance against it. So it's also really important that people make the right decisions and don't feel bounced into them by things like PMQs, I would suggest. And I think, as you say, there's so much for Starmer to hammer Johnson on. It's depressing that yet again they can just talk, he can just reply by talking about anti-Semitism. That's one reason why we need the issue to be over and sorted. But you just kind of think this sort of constant bouncing around to someone else's agenda also doesn't really work as a solution. So I would actually urge Keir Starmer to think very carefully about what happens now, how to avoid a civil war in the party, but also how to make sure that we are giving our kind of Jewish comrades a safe space that they feel safe in again.
Yeah, I think if I was Starmer, I would say the civil war's been won, and I would happily boot Corbyn out for the sake of some peace and quiet. Let him go and form a little splinter group if he wants to. Lose the union money if you want to, because there'll be other money coming to replace it. And the splinter group would just become, socialist work of the future. It would go nowhere. I would just take a brave step, Keir, if you're listening. What do you reckon, Ros? Yay or nay?
Well, I'd always take a different view, I think, which is that I think for me the Labour Party is always at its best when it's at its broadest church. Like for me, every faction of the Labour Party is needed, apart from those people who actually aren't really Labour members at all and just come in and out of the party to cause trouble. Like I'm not very interested in those people. But I think people that have kind of consistently been in the party over a number of years and represent different factions are part of the strength of the Labour Party. And so I want to see all those people in, and trade unionists especially. I have great admiration for trade unionists who do some of the real sort of hardcore work in the country, and actually sort of change things, unlike sometimes people sort of bickering in the NEC or whatever. So I would want to try to find a way to keep all those people in, but that's always a challenge for the Labour Party, and it's a challenge for Johnson at the moment. I mean, his party, again, obviously what's happened with Dominic Cummings and all of that stuff has exposed the rifts yet again within his party, between the sort of red wall Tories that he was so keen to re-embrace that they've all ended up having to self-isolate.
Yeah, they've got the COVID headbangers, they've got the Brexit headbangers, they're just split into loads of different kinds of headbangers, banging their heads against walls on different things. We do want lockdown, we don't want lockdown, blah. But as long as Corbyn continues going on, that's going to be a focus when we should be focusing perhaps on the people who are actually running the country into the ground. Now, I want to talk to you about one important story, which is fascinating to me, which is the story of the day. Now, somebody is going to spend £2.5 million in a project to create some old whiffs, which include the stench of industrialisation, the dung of open sewers in central London. And they're going to share this at events across Britain and Europe. Now, Ros, is there a particular smell from the past you're desperate to whiff, or can you live without this?
I think I've got a very, very strong sense of smell. So the idea of this museum does kind of fill me with a slight dread. Like my sense of smell has always been a bit of a clash for me with my general sort of passion for travelling, and certainly with my kind of war corresponding years. It was not necessarily the bit of yourself that you wanted to be overactive. I think like this museum, it fills me with a slight sense of hell, but also a sense of like fascination. Like I think, we know that Elizabeth I's court absolutely stank, for example. Like everybody really stank. And I think that when I think about my kids, I think they would love that museum. Like, they love horrible histories. Anyone that loves horrible histories.
Yeah, it'd really bring history alive, wouldn't it? It would help you realise a little bit more about how people lived, and perhaps explaining why life expectancy was so short. And there's something I want to read you from a brilliant book called The Bluffer's Guide to Journalism, written by yours truly. But there's something here that's relevant. In 1710, Jonathan Swift wrote this. See if you can tell me what he's describing, Ros. Sweepings from butchers' stalls, dung, guts and blood, drowned puppies, stinking sprats, all drenched in mud, dead cats and turnip tops come tumbling down the flood. What do you think he's writing about?
River Thames?
The Fleet, the River Fleet crossing under Fleet Street. And 1728, Alexander Pope called it the Fleet Ditch, with a large tribute of dead dogs. Now, there is a bit of me.
I'd like to see what you named yourself after.
Exactly. As a Fleet Street, that's my mother. As a Fleet Street denizen, I'm quite keen on trying to learn about what it was like, and trying to I wish you'd go away, trying to smell what it was like to be in Fleet Street in the 18th century. But I just don't think that it's perhaps something I'm prepared to pay £2.5 million for.
I think, well, during the first lockdown, me and my kids got quite into mudlarking. I didn't know that had a name, but it's where you basically go down to the river and you kind of dig about and find things like mostly old shoes and bits of kind of fossilized dog poo. But occasionally you find all kinds of like exciting things down by the Thames. And we found a ridiculous number of pipes, these little white pipes.
Little clay pipes, yeah.
Little clay pipes. And who knew? And apparently everybody had a little clay pipe about, yeah.
Like Popeye, and then just toss them in the river. They were the fag butts of, you know.
Yeah.
Samantha. Okay, Samantha, I'm going to deal with this because we've had a lot of these since last week, and we were talking about viruses and the pandemic on here. On the one hand, whenever we talk about viruses, we do tend to get on this sometimes Facebook accounts which are not genuine, making assertions like the one you've just made. I'm going to assume, Samantha, that you're a normal human being who's seen this somewhere and is making the same assertion, and that you're a genuine human being behind this. Now, if you think that viruses don't exist and that every virologist on Earth is in a giant conspiracy to pretend they do exist and taking money from academic institutions to produce studies that are completely a waste of time, and that we don't get colds and they're not caused by viruses or they're caused by something else, then I can only suggest that you do what a journalist would do when someone presents you with a claim that a virus doesn't exist. Go back and find out where you saw it first, and then ask them where they heard it from and where they got their evidence from, and trace it back to the original source. And I will bet you any money that the original source for this, perhaps 4 or 5 or a dozen different Facebook posts ago, will either be deleted or Russian or a joke. It is not going to be a verifiable source, because viruses can be photographed using an electron microscope. They can be engineered, extracted, changed around, and used to fix the results of other viruses. So they would appear to be not a hypothesis, which is a theoretical idea, but it's a genuine thing which works in the way you would expect it to work. And they don't really exist as such, like a life form. They're just a collection of DNA, and they do stuff. And we don't really appreciate most of what they do, but they can be used and engineered to do some good stuff. So what I would say, I don't know if you agree with me, Ros, is that when people like Samantha write these things down in black and white, other people see it, and there'll be someone out there who goes, well, if Samantha thinks that, maybe there's something in it, and see it a few times or clicks on it, and then the Facebook algorithm sees that you want to talk about stuff like that and takes you down a rabbit hole where that's the only stuff you see, and you stop having a broad intake of information, and any idea that you've got just sort of firms up and solidifies. And that's what Vladimir Putin wants. Eventually, everyone is convinced by the algorithm and by people all talking to each other in an echo chamber that, you know, something like this, which is not provable, is real. And that's incredibly dangerous, isn't it, Ros? People start saying things that Vladimir Putin would appreciate them saying. It's not Samantha's fault, maybe, but she's doing his work for him, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, I was just having a look then at your profile, Samantha, to see whether you're a real person. I mean, like, do feel free to send us an additional message to kind of back up what you're saying. Oh,
God, okay. There we go. Thanks, Samantha.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not convinced that we're not dealing with a kind of bot account at this point. But I just think, look, you know, you look at the US elections and some of the things that were circulating in there, the QAnon conspiracy, for example, that basically kind of claims that Trump is fighting off a massive child abuse conspiracy against the world, and that's why people are trying to remove him as the president of the United States. Now, one of the biggest people to sign up to that conspiracy over the last probably 12 months, according to Hope Not Hate, has been middle-aged women. And it feels as if there are middle-aged women are a particular area where, because of Facebook, because middle-aged women tend to be on Facebook and those sorts of places where a lot of these things are really, really spreading. And of course, anything around a vaccine, already there are a lot of conspiracy groups that operate. And what's quite interesting in the report that I saw from Hope Not Hate anyway, was the way in which one conspiracy leads to another conspiracy. So you might start off with a conspiracy about vaccines, but you very quickly start rubbing shoulders with people that believe in some really quite sinister, I mean, actually not believing in vaccines is also pretty sinister because it costs lives, but it can lead you deeper and deeper into, as Susie says, this kind of rabbit hole where, you know, anti-Semitism, all sorts of things lurk. And it's really, really important when people say things like that on Facebook to just have a look at their account and see if you think it's real, to check it with other people, to look at, you know, to sort of Google the conspiracy, and just, we all really have to educate ourselves because we're fighting against, as Susie says, against algorithms and profiteering and all kinds of, you know, big global things that are going on. So we just have to take responsibility for our own education online, really.
And try and remember that we're all publishers now. It's not just journalists, it's every single one of us with a social media account. If you're publishing something, even if it's just about what you had for your dinner, then once it's in black and white, other people tend to believe it. And if you say something that you might think is a joke, other people might take it seriously. And, you know, Russia is a failed superpower which cannot make itself any stronger. It's very weak. And the only way it can therefore be stronger, and the people running it and the oligarchs who are stealing billions of pounds out of it every year, the only way they can keep on doing that is to make other nations weaker. And the best way to make Britain in particular weak would be to overweigh the NHS, destroy faith in vaccines and medical research, and the kind of things that the bots we have all seen are doing, and to destroy our faith in the way of one of the most probably the most important items of faith of being a British citizen is the NHS, and to destroy our faith in that and to destroy its ability to care for us would be the best way of destroying Britain. So if you are a genuine human being and you are saying things like that about vaccines and about viruses, then ask yourself whether it's something that you really ought to be saying out loud, because it's going to be very, very destructive. And it's the kind of thing Mr. Putin in St. Petersburg, Moscow, is going to be really, really delighted about you saying. And I would just, on the basis of that alone, don't say it then. You know, keep it to yourself. If you don't want a vaccine, it's up to you, but don't go shouting about it. Make sure other people don't do it either. That's daft. Anyway, thank you for joining me, Ros. Thank you for helping me explain some of that. And thank you all those who are watching and listening. And thank you to Samantha, because as well, we've been able to address this big issue which is going on, thanks to you, whether you're real or not. And we'll see you all again next week for the news agenda. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you.